relatively light agenda, which is geared more towards planning. We'd like to report on the closeout fiscal year end 2022 and discuss the budget calendar, discuss the role of budget guidelines, and then review the status of funding for armed security specialists. So that's what we have, although I'm sure other questions will come up. And might as well begin with number one, which is the closeout fiscal year end 2022. And per Stacy's numbers audit, I believe it's a positive 156,000.
Correct. It's a pre-audit. The auditors come out in October. We'll finish in late November, but as of right now.
And that money gets returned to the town. That's for normal. And I think it's, as always, it's testimony to your budgeting because it's a very tight variance. So we're nice to have a positive, in the positive side of the ledger. Do we have any questions or concerns? Comments about that?
So the money gets returned to the town. Does it get put in a specific fund, or is it just like in the big
Into
pot?
the general unassigned fund balance.
So then, if during the next year, the Board of Ed needs like, special appropriations for something, would it come out of that, or it just comes out of the general? Whatever?
Out of the unassigned fund balance, yeah.
Do you know if the town looks at it like, well, we know the Board of Ed put in 156,000, so.
They're aware of it, it's in the audit, it is discussed, and if we do ask for a special appropriation, if we ever do, that rationale will always be there, that we did return. The funds from the prior year.
Okay. Emily, do you have any questions? Okay, thank you. Next up is a draft of our proposed budget calendar. See if I can find it. There's my copy. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And before we get into the specific dates, in general, we as a board and as a committee discussed the calendar, and then the administration and the admin council discuss it on their side. We would hope to take action and possibly approve it by the October 11th meeting. Or at least that's where we're headed. And then various budget numbers get entered into the system. There's a budget discussion. Their proposed district budgets are entered into the economy system on a deadline of, I think it's November 18th.
Yep.
And then that's when the interaction between the administration and the board begins throughout the month of November. We have there are a couple of workshops scheduled in mid-December, January, before it goes to the Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen. So that's the general schedule. I want to emphasize it's just a draft. What you see on the screen is just a draft. I think our goal this year is to front load assumptions and questions so that there are no late entrants into the budget, and that we can have a good productive discussion in November and December.
Do you think the November 18th deadline is early enough? I know Seth had talked about previously about trying to get it even earlier. I just don't know if it's feasible considering today's date.
The push for earlier always impacts, I don't want to say accuracy of the numbers, but the longer we can go, the better we can figure out the cost of items that we're looking to do or changes that we're going to go. So that's what I was struggling with. So you think about, we're budgeting health insurance or fuel or something from July of 2023 to June of 2024. And sometimes we're doing that in September of 2022. So it's just very difficult. We ask a lot of Stacy, and she does a phenomenal job of that, but it's just very difficult to, like, earlier sometimes is the enemy of accuracy and those types of things. And so oftentimes actually with what is going on in the building, Stacy will get asked for extensions from the building principals for a week or so, depending on where Thanksgiving falls. They like to sometimes take that long weekend and redo numbers. And we also want to remember, include each teacher department in building in those discussions as much as possible, so that we want to give them time to have those department level meetings at, say, the high school level, that then filter up to the high school principal, and he then has to make his priorities off of that.
In addition to that, we have to wait for the enrollment projections, and then that's how we base our core allocation. So I have to get that to the buildings to work that into their budget. So it is tight, but I do agree with Dr. Cook, like, we need to get this stuff moving sooner than later, because before the holidays get in the way. And we do end up, I don't really want to say this in public, but we do end up giving an extension or two if needed.
Well, I mean, today's already nearing the end of September, so I feel like we're already late.
Well, I guess the question then is if we feel we have enough opportunities during early mid-December to really hash out the budget. We have 2 meetings scheduled. And then another possible workshop on January 17th.
Yeah, there's a little room flexibility.
Pending weather.
Right.
And this has been pretty consistent. I think the administrators, they know what's coming. And I'm sure their wheels are already spinning. We're getting ready to get moving.
So I guess that would segue to the role of budget guidelines, which we've used in the past. And if I could preface it, so we have annual operating budget guidelines, and then we have budget objectives. And in the past, there was a little concern that, well, how can we have budget objectives before we know what the actual numbers are? Right, before we, and so while we want to start as early as possible, maybe we should recognize that the budget objectives it's not an exhaustive list, it's more of a direction of where the administration is headed based on what they know now. But so we have the guidelines up top and the provisional budget objectives at the bottom of this sheet. And it's an open question of whether we want to continue using this document. And if it's helpful to the administration, I would favor it. And that's maybe that's a discussion point today and for October 11th, when we submit a possible approved, we'll need to approve the budget calendar, right? So the discussion would be, well, are these guidelines and objectives helpful? And it's an open discussion. And while we're thinking about it, I can read the existing budget guidelines. So number 1 is to continue to respond and prioritize educational needs from the COVID pandemic. I think in effect that means tracking ESSER grants and their expiration. Number 2 is to review line items and reallocate funding based on expenditure history to fund priority needs. Some of these needs would be referenced in the provisional objectives below. Item number, these are carry over from year to year. They don't really change very much at all. I mean, including known costs of projected anticipated contractual settlements associated with employee contracts. It would be helpful at some point. I know you have the information. Maybe at our next meeting, we just have a little schedule of teachers may stage when they will in, because I don't know them off the top of my head.
Yep.
And then to Stacy's point earlier, aligning staffing needs and per pupil allocation are directly affected by demographics. So we need that November 18th deadline there. I do want to say that for number 6, where possible, pre-purchase electricity and diesel fuel. While estimated price on natural gas market. So Bill does a fantastic job. I know there's a great firm that he works with. But I do want to note, of course, that in my opinion, at least, our input costs are going to be wildly variable over the next 3 years. You can see what's happening with energy costs. And so that's going to make it harder to budget and necessitate kind of scenario planning analysis. I think we do an excellent job of realizing efficiencies in energy, facilities maintenance. And 8, 9, and 10, preparing for new state guidelines, administration's on top of that. Support and prepare the district reconfiguration, K through 5, pre-K through 5. That's largely in the CIP. Right, with Brown.
So yes, it'd be the CIP for the most part. It would be obviously the school renewal bonding,
Right.
and then also in Bill's planned cycle maintenance, there's funding that goes towards those buildings, and for the most part is before now that's the infrastructure piece. Now there's also some curricular and staffing decisions to be made as well.
Right. And then lastly, we self-fund our health insurance. So for the record, that's what the guidelines have been in the past. And then we have provisional objectives listed. And I don't know if you want to say anything about that, Dr. Cook, or.
Yeah, so if I remember it clearly, I think some of the concern came from last year is that, you're provided with this document, and I think the 11/30 date is that was maybe a second or third run through when we did that. But you see this as a board and you haven't seen the whole document yet, the whole budget. And so this is only certain pieces and highlights. So I wonder if a more accurate reflection of really what this is for is that second part is really administrative council operating budget objectives as of a certain date. And so where it's helpful for Stacy and I, when we're having discussions, and as you know, when we get to that point, there's always something that hits the cutting room floor. There's something that a principal felt very strongly of, or a department head or someone, and it doesn't make the list that's presented to the board. And so we reflect back on this and say, well, remember when we talked in September and early October, this is what we decided was the most important, and where does that fit from there? And so maybe it's something that's not one of the priorities, and that helps guide our discussions with the principals, with department heads when we have to make those tough decisions. So it's helpful for us. I think it's good for the board to see that, but I also understand the board's concern of saying, well, I don't want to necessarily sign up on the math coach, but then I see the budget, you asked for 3 more kindergarten teachers, to address enrollment. And I would rather have the kindergarten teachers and the math coach, but where does it stand now? Or I've heard more of a discussion on, the AP placement program. I'm not sure I support that. Things like that. So I think it would be completely fine with us to make that change, that language change, which I think would help the board.
Maybe also, we see this sort of like finished wish list, if you will. And maybe, when we go through it the first time, a more inclusive list of things like, well, we wanted this and we cut 15 things out, and this is what we're left with, because even though they really wanted this and feel there's a great need for this is needed more, and this is why. And then when you come to us with this pared down list, maybe we're not so much like, we're paring this down like by 82%. We see that you've already done a huge tear down of your list as well. Not that we're not gonna tear it down, but just saying. But
Mac, then
surgeon skills. But but I think it gives us more of a sense of, the overall need in each of the buildings, and what they really feel is what they are more important to them. But these 3 items are the most important, and this is why.
Sure.
And I think the explanation too would be helpful. Emily?
I think that's a great idea, Diane.
Okay, great. And then next up would be the status of funding for our armed school security specialist. Do you have an update on that?
To just wrap up,
Oh, sorry.
that sounded acceptable in terms of what we were looking to do in terms of the second piece. So when we have that, we'll get that to you as a draft.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Thank you. I wanted to share where we stood with this, and it's similar to connects with Diane's questions earlier. So presented for a special appropriation to pay for the armed school security specialist to the Board of Selectmen. That was approved by a 5-0 vote. Tomorrow evening, will that request will go to the Board of Finance. And if approved there, it will need to go to a town meeting. And I don't know that we have a schedule for that at this point.
I think first selectman may have second date, I don't recall.
Okay, all right. And so that's usually part of a Board of Selectmen meeting. Right?
Before, or,
Right
yeah,
before,
it could be before or a different date, but.
Okay.
it's separate.
So I'll keep the board of ed and updated on that. I'll let you know how Wednesday evening goes with the Board of Finance. The request is less than the amount we returned, and I made that point, and I think it was well received. That they understand at the same time we'd be returning funds that we're asking for funds. I was asked, was the intention to include this in next year's budget? And I said for myself, it was in the Board of Ed budget, certainly looking for any grants that may be available to support that. And I was also asked if this was a step along the way in terms of say staffing, security staffing, or if this was kind of a final product. And I said, again, I was speaking for myself, but I felt like this was where we need to be, and until 2025. And then in 2025, we actually could probably look at decreasing staffing because of the fact that we'll have 4 sites, but rather than 6.
Right.
So we would be able to potentially do that through attrition or to other ways, but I did I think that would be a good place in 2025. And like I said, before 2 less students, staff.
Do you anticipate that there will be grants that?
We have been told, from politicians that there would be grants that would address staffing as well as just infrastructure. And so there has been infrastructure grants ongoing. We've been kind of plugging away at those. We had about 60,000 last year. There was a grant that was unused, and then a new grant we applied for. We found about the unused one, we applied for the new one, we got 60,000 that went to cameras. And so we've done some really great work with cameras at the schools, updating those, making sure there's monitoring of them, and we'll keep looking for that. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Well, are there any other topics that we want to discuss tonight?
No.
Okay, we'll develop a wish list for next time.
So for next meeting, Stacy and I will work on this document. We'll have that to you ahead of time.
Okay.
And how do you want me to communicate? Do you want me to communicate to the board in the Friday update, the discussion we had on that, or you'll do that at the next board meeting as well?
Yeah, either way works. I mean,
Okay.
maybe this Friday, sure it's out there earlier.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it is more procedural, but I think it'll just facilitate discussion. Okay. And do we have any public questions or comments? No questions from Diana? I'm sorry.
What?
All right.
Submit at the last name? Or no?
Yes, we did. We answered after you left to come here. We understand that.
And you're an exceptionally well-informed member of the public with those comments, those questions. And no, seriously, The question on the CIP lighting was excellent, and the questions that we addressed, I think, just facilities were, yes, very good. So, all kidding aside, sure.
I have no question.
All right. Emily, anything that you'd like to add or ask?
I'm good, thank you.
All right. Well, with that, then let's call, let's adjourn it at 5:55. 6:55. No. 5:55.
5:55. You're
Right.
Yeah, it does look like 6:55.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. See you both soon.